Raylan sat in the cockpit of his small scavenger ship, eyes scanning the endless expanse of the asteroid belt. The ship's dim lights flickered, casting shadows on the walls, while the hum of the engines was the only sound filling the space. For days, he had been searching for something valuable in this desolate corner of the galaxy, some forgotten relic or useful technology he could fix and sell. Most of the objects floating in the vast junkyard of space were just debris, broken ships, and forgotten parts from a long-gone era. But Raylan wasn't like most scavengers. Where others saw useless trash, he saw potential. With his sharp eyes and skillful hands, he could turn anything into something useful. As the ship drifted closer to a dense cluster of broken-down ships and wreckage, something caught Raylan's attention. Among the twisted remains of metal and shattered tech, there was a faint shimmer, a soft glow, almost hidden. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the usual scrap. This was different. Raylan adjusted the ship's controls and slowly piloted closer, trying not to disturb the debris too much. He had to be careful. Some pieces of junk were dangerous, especially when they had been floating in space for decades, exposed to cosmic radiation. But whatever was glowing had to be important. When he finally reached the source of the light, Raylan's breath caught in his throat. Half buried under some rusted plates and wires, there was a humanoid shape, unmistakably artificial, yet beautiful in a way that struck him. It was a figure of smooth, silvered metal, and even though it had seen better days, it had an elegance to it. The faint glow seemed to pulse from within, as if the figure was waiting to come back to life. Raylan floated outside his ship, securing himself with a safety line as he drifted towards the wreckage. He carefully began removing the junk that had piled up around the figure. As he pulled away the last piece of debris, he could see it more clearly. A humanoid robot, its body sleek and sophisticated, with delicate patterns etched into the metal. This wasn't just any robot. The craftsmanship was beyond anything Raylan had ever seen. It was clearly of a much higher quality than the usual tech he found in the junkyard. And it was still intact. Mostly. The robot's face was serene, its eyes dimmed, as if frozen in time. The glow Raylan had noticed earlier was coming from a small circular plate on its chest, which seemed to be malfunctioning, flickering in and out. Raylan carefully inspected the body. There were no obvious signs of damage, other than the thick layer of space dust and some deep scratches from years of drifting in space. "Well, you're a mystery," Raylan murmured to himself. He couldn't just leave it here. Something about this robot felt different, and Raylan had learned over the years that if something felt important, it usually was. He had no idea what he had found, but he knew he couldn't let it slip away. With expert hands, Raylan began the delicate task of disassembling the robot's outer casing. As he worked, he muttered to himself, trying to guess what kind of technology this robot might hold. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. His mind raced with possibilities. Could it be part of an old military project? Maybe a private venture that had gone wrong? Or perhaps it was simply an abandoned experiment, left to rot in the void of space. After a while, Raylan uncovered a small compartment in the back of the robot, near its spine. He cautiously opened it and found a glowing panel that looked like a power core, surrounded by other intricate machinery. But there was no sign of the robot's name or origin. The robot had no visible markings, no clues about who had built it or where it had come from. It was a complete mystery, but Raylan wasn't deterred. He had seen stranger things during his years of scavenging, and he had always managed to find a way to make them work. This time would be no different. With the robot's power core exposed, Raylan decided to make a risky move. He couldn't be sure the robot would even power up again, but he couldn't leave without knowing for sure. He connected the robot to his ship's power system, bypassing the broken circuits and hoping for the best. For a moment, nothing happened. Raylan held his breath, waiting. Then, just as he was about to give up, the robot's chest plate began to glow brighter. The flickering light steadied, and the robot's eyes slowly opened, revealing a soft blue light. Raylan stepped back, his heart pounding. The robot had come to life. It was a strange feeling, standing before a machine that had been in hibernation for who knows how long, and now it was awake, fully functional, or at least, it seemed to be. The blue light in its eyes flickered as it processed its surroundings, and for a moment, Raylan wondered if it even knew where it was. "Hello?" Raylan asked cautiously, unsure of what kind of response to expect. The robot's head tilted slightly, as if trying to understand him. The blue light in its eyes softened, and then, in a smooth, almost melodic voice, it spoke. "Who am I?" Raylan smiled, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out together." Raylan watched in awe as the robot's eyes flickered, its mechanical movements jerky at first, like it was trying to shake off years of stillness. He stood back, his heart racing. The robot, now clearly something more than just a machine, was slowly becoming aware of its surroundings. He had no idea how it had survived all these years out here, floating in the cold emptiness of space, but he was glad to see it working again. The robot's gaze moved slowly across the wreckage around them, taking in the strange new world it had awoken to. Then, it focused on Raylan, as if recognizing him for the first time. For a long moment, there was silence. "What happened?" The robot's voice was soft, almost confused. It sounded like it had been built to speak, but the words felt as if they were slowly finding their way out. Raylan cleared his throat, still unsure of what to make of the situation. "You're in a junkyard. I found you here, and I fixed you up." The robot's head tilted slightly, as if processing his words. "A junkyard," it repeated, as though tasting the word. "Where am I? What is this place?" Raylan took a deep breath and stepped forward, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "You're on an asteroid, far from any known colonies. Space junk is scattered all around, and I make a living by scavenging useful parts from ships and technology. I repair things, sell them, make a living." The robot's eyes scanned the junkyard with curiosity, the blue light in them dimming as if thinking, "I do not remember." Raylan frowned. He could see that the robot, who had no name yet, was clearly confused. Its memory was likely damaged from being abandoned, drifting in space for so long. He could relate in some ways. After all, he had spent so much time alone on this asteroid, fixing things and searching for something valuable, yet never truly connecting with anyone. The thought of being forgotten, of not knowing one's purpose, felt all too familiar. "Do you know who you are?" Raylan asked carefully. The robot paused, its blue eyes flickering again, almost as if searching through empty spaces. "I remember fragments," it said softly. "I was made, I think." Its voice trailed off, uncertain. Raylan knelt down in front of the robot, placing his hand on its metal arm. "Hey, it's okay. We'll figure this out together." The robot looked at him, its face showing no emotion, yet Raylan could sense a quiet sadness behind its blank expression. It didn't speak again for a few moments, as if trying to understand what he meant. Raylan thought for a moment, trying to come up with a way to help the robot. It needed more than just a fix. It needed to understand what had happened to it, to find some purpose in the world again. He knew the robot had incredible potential, if only it could remember its full abilities. "I'm going to keep you with me," Raylan said. "You don't have to be alone." The robot seemed to respond to his words. Its gaze softened, though it still appeared lost. "Alone," it whispered, almost as if the word itself caused it pain. Raylan stood and offered a hand. "Let's start small. I'll teach you about this place, and we can work together. You'll see. This junkyard, it's full of things to explore. I'll show you how I fix things. We'll figure out what you were made for." For the first time, the robot's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, a mechanical, almost imperceptible movement, but it was there. "What should I call myself?" Raylan paused. He hadn't expected the robot to ask such a question. He thought for a moment, scanning his surroundings. He had always worked alone, never needed to name his machines or tools. But this was different. This was not just another piece of junk to fix or sell. This robot was alive in some way, and it deserved a name, something personal. How about Lyra? Raylan suggested. Lyra. The robot repeated the name softly, as if testing it on its own tongue. It was the name of a star constellation, bright and beautiful. Lyra, it whispered again, and this time, it sounded almost like it belonged to the robot. Raylan smiled. Yeah, I think it suits you. The two of them spent the next few hours together. Raylan carefully showed Lyra how to interact with the world around her, teaching her simple tasks and allowing her to explore the junkyard at her own pace. Despite her confusion, Lyra seemed to absorb information quickly, her movements becoming more fluid and her responses more natural. It was as if the pieces of herself she had lost were slowly starting to come back. But even as Lyra began to function again, there was an emptiness inside her, a lack of true purpose. She had no memory of what she had been created for or who had made her. Raylan could see that this troubled her. Lyra was more than just a machine. She was something alive, something that could feel, even if she didn't quite understand how yet. I don't know who I am, Lyra admitted, her voice soft, the uncertainty still hanging in her words. But I want to learn. I want to know. Raylan looked at her and nodded. We'll figure it out, together. And for the first time in a long while, Raylan didn't feel so alone. In Lyra, he had found a companion, one who, despite not knowing her origins, was willing to trust him and try to find meaning in her new life. As night fell over the junkyard and the stars shone brightly above, Raylan knew their journey had only just begun. But something told him that with Lyra by his side, they would uncover answers neither of them could have imagined. Over the next few weeks, Raylan and Lyra worked side by side in the junkyard, repairing old ships, scavenging parts, and finding ways to make the most of what they had. Lyra had started to become more comfortable with her surroundings, her movements becoming less mechanical and more natural. She learned quickly, absorbing everything Raylan taught her with an eagerness that surprised him. She had no memory of her past, but Raylan noticed a change in her, a spark of curiosity that was growing each day. She had started to ask questions about the things she saw, the world outside the junkyard, and even the stars in the sky. For the first time in a long while, Raylan didn't feel as alone. There was something about having Lyra around, her presence bringing a new sense of purpose to his life. One afternoon, as they were working on an old cargo ship that Raylan had found floating nearby, Lyra paused and looked at him with her soft, glowing blue eyes. Raylan, she said, her voice calm but with a touch of something new, something almost human. Why do you fix things? Raylan wiped his hands on his shirt and leaned against the ship's side, thinking about her question. It's what I know how to do, he said simply. I've been doing this for years, finding things that others have forgotten, bringing them back to life. It's a way to survive out here, I guess. Lyra nodded, her gaze still fixed on him. But you don't just fix things. You make them work again. You give them a second chance. Raylan smiled, a little surprised by the depth of her words. Yeah, I guess I do. That's what I enjoy about it. I think, Lyra began, trailing off as if she was trying to understand her own thoughts. I think that's what I want to do too. Raylan raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Lyra stood up, her movements graceful and confident now. I want to help, Raylan. I want to fix things, not just machines, but people too. I want to give them a second chance. I want to find my purpose. Raylan looked at her, seeing something in her that he hadn't fully understood before. It wasn't just about fixing things for her. It was about finding something meaningful in the world, something that could give her a sense of belonging. You already have a purpose, Lyra, Raylan said quietly. You've already helped me more than you know. Lyra smiled, though it was a small, uncertain smile. but I don't think I can be truly happy unless I know what I'm meant to do. Raylan nodded, understanding her need to find answers. He had felt that way too, in the years he had spent alone in the junkyard. He had always searched for something more, something that would make his life feel less empty. Now, with Lyra by his side, he realized that maybe finding meaning wasn't just about answers. It was about the journey and the connections made along the way. "I understand," he said. "We'll figure it out together, one step at a time." That evening, after another day of work, Raylan and Lyra sat outside the ship, watching the stars twinkle in the dark sky. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural. Lyra's thoughts seemed distant, her eyes gazing up at the stars. "Raylan," she said after a long pause, "do you ever wonder what's out there? Beyond this junkyard, beyond the stars we see?" Raylan looked up at the vast expanse of space. He had spent most of his life in the shadows of the asteroid belt, far from the bustling colonies and cities that existed on the other side of the galaxy. He had never dared to dream about what lay beyond. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "I've always been too focused on surviving, I guess, but I've heard stories about distant planets, about new worlds where people live in peace. I've always wondered what it would be like to see those places." Lyra turned to him, her eyes glowing softly in the dark. "Maybe we could go there," she said. "Maybe we could find those places and see what's out there together." Raylan's heart skipped a beat. The thought of leaving the junkyard and traveling to unknown worlds was a terrifying one. But with Lyra, the idea didn't seem impossible. She wasn't just a robot anymore. She was a companion, someone who shared his curiosity, his longing for something more. He smiled at her, a mix of excitement and uncertainty bubbling inside him. "Maybe we will. Maybe we'll go out there and see what the universe has to offer." Lyra smiled back, a look of hope in her eyes. For the first time, she truly seemed at peace with herself. Raylan could see the spark of something new in her, something more than just a machine. She was starting to understand what it meant to be alive, to have purpose. And together, they would find it. The next day, they began working on the starship Raylan had repaired weeks earlier. It wasn't the best ship, far from it, but it was theirs. They had fixed it up together, making it flyable once again. It was a humble start, but it was a start nonetheless. Lyra helped Raylan chart a course through the asteroid belt, her advanced navigation systems making it easier to plot their route. Raylan worked on the ship's engines, making sure everything was in working order. Together, they were making progress. Together, they were creating something new. "We're ready," Raylan said, looking up from the engine. "Let's see where this ship can take us." Lyra nodded, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. "Let's find out." And so the two of them set off, leaving the junkyard behind and heading toward the unknown. They didn't know what they would find, but they knew they wouldn't be alone on the journey. They had each other, and that was enough. The small ship shook slightly as it cruised through the asteroid belt, weaving around chunks of rock and old ships. Raylan's hands gripped the controls firmly as the ship's engines hummed steadily. He glanced over at Lyra, who was seated at the navigation panel, her fingers moving quickly across the touchscreen. "We're getting closer," Lyra said softly, her voice calm and clear, though there was a trace of excitement beneath the words. "We're almost through the asteroid field." Raylan nodded, his gaze still focused on the narrow path ahead. The asteroid belt was a dangerous place, filled with debris that could tear a ship apart if you weren't careful. But Lyra's navigation system was better than anything he could have hoped for, and her steady hands guided them through the dangerous terrain with ease. "You're doing great," Raylan said with a smile. "I think we're going to make it." Lyra's eyes glowed a little brighter as she responded with a quiet, "Thank you, Raylan." The silence that followed was peaceful, yet filled with anticipation. Raylan had never ventured far from the junkyard before. The idea of leaving behind everything he knew, of heading toward the unknown, had been a distant dream. But now, with Lyra by his side, that dream was becoming a reality. Minutes passed, and the asteroid field finally gave way to the open space beyond. Raylan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "We did it," he said, almost to himself. Lyra smiled. "We're free." For a while, they just drifted in the vast emptiness of space, taking in the view. The stars seemed brighter now, far more beautiful than anything Raylan had ever seen in the Junkyard's dim light. He turned to Lyra, who was still gazing at the stars through the ship's window. "Where do we go now?" Raylan asked. Lyra's eyes flickered as she brought up a star chart on the ship's screen. "There are several planets in this system," she said thoughtfully. "But I think we should go to Niran. It's a peaceful planet with a thriving colony. They have resources we could use, and I think it would be a good place to learn more about what's out there." Raylan's eyes narrowed as he studied the chart. Niran was known to be a peaceful place, but it was also a hub for traders and explorers. He wasn't sure if they were ready for a place like that, but Lyra's suggestion made sense. It could be the fresh start they needed. "All right, Niran it is," Raylan said with a nod. "Let's head there." As Lyra adjusted the course, Raylan leaned back in his seat, his mind racing with possibilities. They had left the Junkyard behind, but now they were heading toward a new life, a new chapter. The journey felt endless, and yet there was something strangely comforting about it. It wasn't long before they reached the outskirts of Niran's star system. The planet itself was a beautiful sight, a lush world with oceans, forests, and towering mountains. From space, it looked like paradise, a place far removed from the cold emptiness of the Junkyard. As the ship descended toward the planet's surface, Raylan could feel the excitement building inside him. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, a place where they could make a new life, where they could discover more about who they were and what they were meant to do. "Prepare for landing." Lyra's calm voice broke through his thoughts. Raylan quickly strapped himself in and looked out the window. The planet was getting closer, and soon they would touch down. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, Raylan could feel the pressure of the air outside pushing against the hull. The small ship rocked slightly, but Lyra guided it smoothly toward a landing pad on the planet's edge. "Touchdown," Lyra announced as the ship finally came to rest on the ground. Raylan unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, stretching his legs. "We made it," he said with a grin. Lyra turned to him, her eyes glowing brighter in the dim light of the cabin. "We did. Now, let's see what this world has to offer." Together, they made their way to the exit. Raylan stepped out first, taking in the fresh air of Niran's planet. It was warm, a soft breeze carrying the scent of greenery and water. The sky above was a clear blue, and the distant mountains were covered in forests that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Wow," Raylan said, his voice filled with awe. "This place, it's beautiful." Lyra stepped out beside him, her gaze sweeping over the landscape. "It's more than I expected," she said quietly. They were standing in a small clearing near the landing pad, surrounded by tall grass and a few scattered trees. The area seemed peaceful, but there was a sense of movement in the air. In the distance, Raylan could see the lights of a small colony, probably a few miles away. "This is where we begin," Raylan said, turning to Lyra. "We'll explore this planet, find out what it has to offer, and maybe we'll even find some answers to your past." Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And maybe we'll find answers for you too, Raylan, about who you really are and what you want from this world." Raylan smiled at her. "I think we both have a lot to figure out." For the first time since he had found Lyra in the Junkyard, Raylan felt a sense of hope. They were no longer searching in the darkness of space alone. Together, they had a chance to build something new. They had each other, and that was all they needed to take their first steps into the unknown. The world of Niran stretched before them, full of mystery and possibility. Whatever lay ahead, Raylan knew one thing for sure: they were no longer alone, and they were ready for whatever the future had in store. Raylan and Lyra walked together into the small colony that lay just beyond the landing pad. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the land. The air was fresh, and the peaceful sounds of nature filled the atmosphere. It felt like a dream, a new world, a new life, all waiting for them to explore. As they made their way down the dirt path leading toward the heart of the colony, Raylan couldn't help but notice the people going about their daily business. The streets were lined with small shops, and children played near the open fields. It was peaceful and orderly, a sharp contrast to the cold, empty junkyard they had left behind. "This place is incredible," Raylan said, taking it all in. "I never imagined anything like this existed." Lyra walked beside him, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a quiet curiosity. She seemed fascinated by everything. The colors, the people, the energy of life that filled the air. "I think it's everything we've been looking for," Lyra said. "A place to start over, a place to belong." Raylan smiled at her, feeling the same sense of wonder. He had always dreamed of a better life, but he had never thought it would be possible. Yet here they were, on a beautiful planet, with endless possibilities ahead of them. As they walked deeper into the colony, they were greeted by several people who nodded politely, recognizing them as newcomers. One elderly woman, with silver hair and a warm smile, approached them. "Welcome to Niran," she said cheerfully. "You must be the ones who arrived in that ship not long ago. I'm Marta. I run a small shop here, selling supplies to travelers and explorers. If you need anything, I'm your person." Raylan extended his hand, shaking Marta's firmly. "Thanks for the warm welcome. I'm Raylan, and this is Lyra." Marta's eyes sparkled as she looked at Lyra, taking in her unique appearance. "Ah, a robot, I see. Don't see many of those around here, but you're more than just a machine, aren't you?" Lyra's blue eyes glowed slightly as she nodded. "Yes, I am. I'm learning. I'm not just a robot." Marta smiled warmly at Lyra. "I can tell. There's something special about you, child. You've come to the right place." Raylan and Lyra exchanged a look, both feeling a sense of reassurance from Marta's kind words. "We're just starting out," Raylan said. "We don't know much about this place yet, but we're hoping to find a way to contribute, maybe even find some answers." Marta's expression softened. "You'll find your way here. Don't worry. Niran has a way of giving people second chances, but you've got to be patient. Things take time." Raylan nodded thoughtfully. "That's what we're hoping for. Time to build something new." "Then come with me," Marta said, gesturing for them to follow her. "I'll show you around and introduce you to some folks who might be able to help. You'll see, Niran's not just about living. It's about building something that lasts." Raylan and Lyra followed Marta through the bustling streets of the colony. As they walked, Marta told them stories about the planet's history, how Niran had once been a barren world, struggling to survive until settlers came and transformed it into a thriving place full of life and opportunity. "Some say Niran is the heart of the galaxy," Marta said, her voice filled with pride. "It's a place where people come to find peace, to start over, and to make their mark on the universe. If you work hard, you can make anything happen here." Raylan felt a spark of hope as he listened to Marta. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the place he and Lyra could finally build a future together. They reached Marta's shop, a small but cozy building filled with shelves of supplies, tools, and maps. It was the kind of place Raylan had imagined when he thought about starting over. Marta led them inside and began pulling out a few supplies that might be useful to them. "We've got a lot of travelers passing through here," Marta explained. "People come from all over, looking for a new start. Some leave, some stay, but everyone finds something that changes their lives." Lyra looked around, her eyes scanning the items on the shelves. She seemed to be absorbing every detail, every bit of information. Raylan noticed how focused she was, as if each new piece of knowledge was another part of her puzzle falling into place. "I think this is where we need to be," Lyra said quietly, her voice full of certainty. Raylan smiled, glancing at her with a mix of affection and understanding. I think so, too. Marta watched them both with a knowing smile. You're starting to see it, aren't you? Niran has a way of making you believe in new beginnings. As they talked, Raylan and Lyra began to realize that they had found a place where they could make a difference. Niran offered everything they needed: a fresh start, a chance to build a life, and the possibility of finding answers to their questions. But more than that, it offered the opportunity to be part of something larger, a community of people who cared for one another and worked together to create something beautiful. I think we're ready for this, Raylan said, feeling a surge of excitement. We've found our place. Lyra looked at him, her blue eyes glowing with a quiet joy. We have, Raylan, and together we'll make it something worth living for. Marta smiled at the two of them, her heart warmed by the connection she could see between them. I'm glad you're here, she said. I think you'll both do great things. And as Raylan and Lyra looked around the small shop, the sounds of the bustling colony outside, they knew that their journey was far from over. But they also knew that Niran was the first step towards something new, something they would build together. Raylan and Lyra settled into their new life on Niran, slowly but steadily. The days passed by with a peaceful rhythm as they worked side by side, learning more about the colony and its people. The colony, which was small yet vibrant, had everything they needed: food, shelter, and a community that welcomed them. Every day, Raylan worked on repairing old machines and helping out in the community. His skills were in high demand, and he quickly became known for his ability to fix almost anything. Lyra, who had once been only a machine, began to find her own way of contributing. She helped people with technology, offering her advanced knowledge to improve things around the colony. Raylan could see the change in her. She was no longer just a robot. She was becoming a part of the community, a person with her own thoughts, desires, and ideas. Watching her grow was a strange but comforting feeling for Raylan. It was as though they were both starting fresh, building something from the ground up. One afternoon, as they sat outside their small home, Lyra looked out at the horizon, her gaze far off. Raylan, she began, her voice thoughtful. Do you ever think about what happens after we build something here? After we find the answers we're looking for? Raylan glanced at her, surprised by the question. He had never really thought about what came next. They had come to Niran to escape their pasts, to find meaning in their lives. But now that they were building something new, he realized there was more to think about. I don't know, Raylan said, his voice quiet. I guess I've been so focused on just getting by, I haven't really thought about what comes after. He paused, glancing at her with a small smile. But now that we're here, I think it's time to start thinking about the future, a real future. Not just surviving, but actually living. Lyra nodded slowly, a faint smile playing on her lips. I like that. Living, not just existing. Raylan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her. She had come so far from the quiet, confused figure he had found in the junkyard. Now she was filled with dreams and ideas, just like him. They were both learning how to live together. Over the next few weeks, the colony became more and more like home to them. They made new friends, people who shared their values of hard work and hope for the future. Raylan helped a young mechanic named Kira with a ship that had broken down, and in return, Kira taught him a few new tricks. Lyra spent her time in the colony's tech center, improving the systems and offering advice to anyone who needed it. But despite the warmth of the colony, Raylan and Lyra both knew they couldn't stay here forever. There was still so much they didn't know about the universe, and the answers they sought were out there, somewhere beyond Niran's borders. One evening, as the two of them sat together in the small garden they had started to tend, Lyra spoke up again. Raylan, I've been thinking. We've built a good life here, but we can't stay in one place forever, can we? Raylan looked at her, his heart skipping a beat. What do you mean? I mean, "There's still so much we don't know," she said, her eyes serious. "I want to keep learning, keep exploring, and I want to do it with you." Raylan's mind raced. He had thought about leaving before, but he hadn't been sure if it was the right time. He was comfortable here, and Lyra seemed to be thriving, but hearing her words made him realize that they both needed to continue their journey. "You're right," Raylan said softly. "We've built something great here, but there's a whole universe out there waiting for us." Lyra's eyes brightened. "Exactly." Raylan smiled, his decision clear. "Then it's time to leave again. We'll take the ship and head out into space, see what's out there, and keep searching for our purpose." The next day, they began preparing for their departure. They packed their things, making sure the ship was in good condition for the journey ahead. Raylan's hands moved quickly as he checked the engines, ensuring everything was working perfectly. Lyra worked alongside him, her advanced knowledge making it easier to fine-tune the ship's systems. It felt right. Leaving Niran wasn't easy, but it was the next step in their journey. They had come to Niran to find answers, and they had. They had found a sense of peace, a sense of community, and most importantly, a sense of purpose. But now it was time to continue moving forward, to keep searching for the greater truths they both sought. As they stood at the edge of the landing pad, ready to leave, Raylan turned to Lyra with a smile. "Let's go, Lyra. Let's see where the universe takes us." Lyra smiled back, her blue eyes shining with excitement. "Together, we can go anywhere." With that, they boarded their ship, leaving the peaceful world of Niran behind. As the engines roared to life and the ship soared into the stars, Raylan and Lyra knew that they were no longer just drifting through space. They were on a journey that was all their own. The universe was vast and unknown, but with each other, they were ready for whatever came next. Whatever the future held, Raylan and Lyra would face it together, side by side. Raylan and Lyra's ship drifted through the stars, the vast emptiness of space stretching out before them. The universe seemed endless, filled with mysteries and possibilities they hadn't yet begun to understand. But with each passing day, Raylan and Lyra felt more certain of one thing. They were exactly where they needed to be, together. The ship had become their home, a place where they worked, rested, and dreamed. Raylan still tinkered with the ship's systems, improving its speed and performance, while Lyra continued to expand her knowledge, learning from every new planet they visited and every new person they met. They had already explored several planets, some full of life, others barely inhabited, but each one had offered something valuable: new lessons, new experiences, and a deeper understanding of the world and the universe. It was during one of these journeys that they came across a planet unlike any they had seen before. The planet, called Valara, was covered in beautiful purple and blue forests, with tall trees that stretched into the clouds. The air was thick with the scent of flowers, and the sounds of distant birds filled the air. From space, the planet looked like a jewel, a sparkling gem in the middle of the galaxy. Raylan's eyes widened as he looked out the window. "I've never seen anything like it," he said in awe. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the planet below. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "We should explore it." Raylan nodded. "Let's see what this planet has to offer." They landed near the edge of one of the great forests, stepping out into the soft grass. The air felt warm and welcoming, and as they walked through the trees, they marveled at the strange and wonderful sights around them. There were creatures flying through the trees, their wings glowing in the dim light, and flowers that seemed to sing when touched by the wind. For the first time in a long while, Raylan felt a deep sense of peace. It was as if the world around him was telling him that everything would be all right, that he and Lyra were on the right path. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they stumbled upon a small village. It was simple, built from the same trees that surrounded them, with homes crafted from the natural materials of the land. The people of the village, with their dark skin and bright eyes, welcomed them with open arms. They offered food and shelter, inviting Raylan and Lyra to stay and rest for a while. The village elder, an elderly woman with silver hair, greeted them with a warm smile. "You are travelers from beyond the stars, yes?" she asked in a soft, melodic voice. Raylan nodded. "Yes. We've been exploring the galaxy, learning about different worlds." The elder's eyes sparkled as she studied them. "I can sense the journey you've been on," she said. "You seek something deeper than just the answers to your questions. You seek purpose." Lyra's eyes widened at the elder's words, and Raylan looked at her with surprise. "How did you know that?" he asked. The elder smiled gently. "The universe speaks to those who listen. And you two have been listening." Raylan and Lyra exchanged a glance. It was true. They had been searching for more than just a place to live. They had been searching for meaning. Something that would give their lives direction. Something that would make all their efforts feel worthwhile. The elder led them to a small stone building in the center of the village. Inside, there were ancient carvings on the walls, telling the story of the planet and its people. She explained that the Valorans had long known the secrets of the universe, and that they had been entrusted with the knowledge of how to find balance and peace. "You see," the elder said, "the universe is a vast, interconnected web. Everything is connected. Every star, every planet, every living being. When you find your place in the web, when you understand your purpose, that's when you find peace." Raylan and Lyra listened intently, absorbing every word. The elder's words resonated deeply with them. They had been searching for something, and now it seemed as though they were beginning to understand what it was. "You both have a purpose," the elder said, her eyes glowing with wisdom. "But that purpose is not something you can find in one place or at one time. It is something you must discover on your journey, in the people you meet and the worlds you explore. Keep searching, and you will find it." Raylan felt a sense of calm settle over him as he listened to the elder's words. They had been searching for answers, but they had never truly understood that the journey itself was the answer. It was the path they walked together that would lead them to the purpose they sought. Lyra, too, seemed to have found something in the elder's words. She looked up at the sky, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "The journey," she whispered. "That's the answer. We are the journey." Raylan smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection to her. "Yes," he said softly, "we are the journey, and we'll walk it together." With the elder's blessing, Raylan and Lyra continued their journey, leaving the peaceful planet of Valara behind. As they flew into the stars once more, they knew that the answers they sought were not waiting for them in one place, but in the experience of living itself. They were part of the universe's great web, and the path they walked together would lead them to the purpose they had been searching for all along. The stars were vast, the universe infinite, but with each other, Raylan and Lyra knew they could face whatever lay ahead. Together, they were ready to continue their journey, and wherever it took them, they would find meaning in the adventure itself.